Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this ordinary meeting of KERBSIDE Council on the 15th of June. Just remind people about mobile phones, if they could be turned off, thank you. Acknowledgement of country. KERBSIDE Council acknowledge the Gundungurra and Tharawal people as the traditional custodians of this land we now call the KERBSIDE. I pay my respect to elders, both past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here or watching today. A prayer. Let us meet in this council chamber in a spirit of fellowship and goodwill to represent all the members of the community in its cultural and religious diversity, to be honest and objective in all our deliberations, to respect the view of the residents, the rights of all to express their opinions without fear or favour, and to make decisions for the common good of the community. I would also acknowledge the statement of ethical obligations. General Manager, there's obviously no apologies. Confirmation of minutes. I would move the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on 18 May be adopted as a correct record of the proceedings of the meeting and declare that carried. I think it should be Wednesday. Declarations of interest. General Manager.
There are no declarations of interest, Mr. May.
Thank you very much. I don't have a minute this month. So we move on to the general business listed by the General Manager. The first item being the review of low and medium density residential development.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Executive Manager Strategic Outcomes, Mr. Park, will introduce this item.
Thank you. Mr. May, this report just provides an update to both Council and the community on a number of really important projects that the strategic planning team have recently commenced, being the review of low and medium density housing controls respectively. Look, the projects are, I guess, one of the many steps that Council are taking to implement the local housing strategy and to try to provide a greater diversity of housing types to support the changing housing needs of the community, but doing so in a way that is in keeping with the local context and local character, and ensuring that new development occurs in accordance with the community's expectations. The projects are being run with the assistance of the Planning Delivery Unit, who have funded the consultants to undertake these projects. Consultation is commencing next week to try to get upfront input from both the community, industry and the staff who are using these planning framework to make sure that the proposed changes are robust and based on feedback from the community and industry.
Thank you. And I note you're advertising for residents and other people who may be interested to participate in reference groups?
Yep, so we've advertised and written to a lot of the local community groups and local industry groups to try to get that upfront input into the assessment. So the first workshop, I believe, is next Tuesday evening. We've had a lot of interest, which is great. We're currently looking at trying to increase the capacity to accommodate all of the interest, but it's really positive that we've got so much interest in these projects.
Yeah. It's fair to say this is another step in the elected body taking control back of the result of development in the area, so that at the higher level, the council can control through DCPs what the staff and the panel will be dealing with.
Yeah, look, that's exactly right. It's about trying to ensure that the planning framework is reflective of the community's vision for the future Shire. So we know that population is growing. We know that we need to provide housing to meet our changing housing needs, but how do we do that in a way that's in keeping with the community's expectations? And the best way that council can do that is through having a really robust planning framework that delivers positive outcomes on the ground.
So we can't overemphasise the importance of residents becoming involved in the early days of this process.
Exactly right. And this is about getting their input right at the very start of the process. There'll be multiple chances for the community to have a say throughout the process, but this is about identifying the issues and I guess the vision for what we want to see in terms of medium density housing in the Shire.
Thank you very much. In relation to this matter, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined page 8 of the business paper 1 and 2. But make that deliver, thank you, and declare that carried. The next item is the Small Business Commissioner's report.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Director, Corporate and Corporate Strategy and Resourcing, Ms. Foster, will introduce this item.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, following the suspension of Wingecarribee Council and the appointment of yourself as the Interim Administrator, 12th of March 2021, the New South Wales Minister for Finance and Small Business asked the New South Wales Small Business Commissioner to consult with small businesses within the council area on their experiences with council. The Commissioner and the Commissioner's Office engaged with a range of businesses throughout the Shire and prepared a detailed report outlining the findings of the consultation. The Commission used a range of consultation methods, including meeting with small business owners face-to-face and completing an online survey, receiving 57 responses from small business owners that operate within Wingecarribee Shire. This report provided an overview of the findings of the Commission and preliminary responses from Council. A copy of the Small Business Commission report was tabled at the Ordinary Council meeting of 14th of July 2021. During the same period of time, Council undertook consultation with local businesses and business association representatives, culminating in the Economic Development Roundtable held on the 25th of June 2021 and independently facilitated by KPMG. The report from this session was also tabled at that Ordinary Council meeting, 14th of July 2021. The Small Business Commissioner's report and the Economic Development Roundtable identified 3 focus areas to guide consideration of strategic initiatives to support small businesses. The responsibility for the focus areas are predominantly across the Directorates of Corporate Resourcing and Strategy, Communities in Place and the General Manager's Office. They comprised improved communications and customer services, enhancements to development applications and other approval processes, and initiatives to build opportunity in small business development. Council has been and continues to work on the actions of this report and other reviews that have been commissioned over that period of time. A report was submitted to Council on the 25th in December 2021 to provide an update on each of the actions. This report is to provide a further update on the actions and to then include them in Council's delivery and operational plan.
Thank you. As I've said previously, I attended the Small Business Commissioner's consultations, and I've got to say it was a sobering day for me, and it highlighted the challenge that confronted this organisation. I'm very pleased with the progress that's being made, but I have and I would suggest that so the Small Business Commissioner is kept in the loop, and the government through the minister who commissioned this, that we had a number 2, a copy of the update action report be forwarded to the New South Wales Small Business Commissioner. And I would declare, I would move the officer's recommendation on page 12 of the business paper plus add number 2, and I declare that carried. Code of meeting practice.
Thank you, Mr. May. Group Manager, Corporate and Community Services, Ms. Lidgard, will introduce this item.
Thank you, General Manager. At the meeting held on the 16th of March, Council resolved that the Code of Meeting Practice would be placed on public exhibition to seek community feedback as to whether an opening prayer should be read at the commencement of the Council meeting. The public exhibition period started on the 6th of April and concluded on the 20th of May. 120 submissions were received in response to the public exhibition. 68% of respondents answered that they did not wish to have an opening prayer. Reasons included the desire to keep religion and state practices separate. Prayers were out of date, particularly considering modern multicultural and multi-faith societies, and that prayers are not inclusive. 32% answered that they wish to retain an opening prayer. Reasons included the desire to retain Christian values and traditions, a belief that prayers assist counsellors and staff and the community to undertake civic duties, and a belief that the prayer is inclusive. Based on the community feedback, this report recommends Section 8 of the Code of Meeting Practice be amended to remove the opening prayer from the order of business.
On my arrival at this place, I did my best to address the question of the prayer, to make it, in effect, interdenominational, I suppose you could say. But look, in my view, it's been overtaken by the order of, by the, what do they call it? The Statement of Ethical Obligations. And I think that's probably a more appropriate thing to do. And I'm surprised by the number of people who have made submissions, though, I've got to say. But look, I thank the staff for this one, and I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 22 of the business paper, but make that number 1, and number 2, it be recommended to the incoming council that councillors, by rotation at the commencement of meetings, read the Statement of Ethical Obligations. And I will declare that carried. The comment I'd make is that it would now be listed as an item on business papers, or the order, but what I'm suggesting is that councillors take it in turn to read that. But that's a matter for the incoming council. I can only make a recommendation. 10.3, the complaints policy.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. May. Again, Group Manager, Corporate and Community Services, Ms. Lidgard. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. A review of Council's complaint handling policy has been undertaken, and this report seeks Council endorsement to place the revised feedback and complaints management policy included in attachment 1 to this report on public exhibition. Council last adopted its complaints handling policy in January 2014, and a review has been undertaken and a number of amendments are proposed to bring the policy in line with the New South Wales Ombudsman model policy for complaint handling. The review has also included benchmarking against other councils in New South Wales. The revised feedback and complaints management policy has been substantially amended to reflect policy statements in the New South Wales Ombudsman model policy on complaint handling, in particular the facilitation of complaints and responding to complaints. The revised policy also incorporates the broader term feedback, which includes compliments, complaints and suggestion for handling. In addition, the revised policy also details various channels to lodge feedback and covers accountability and learning. It's recommended that this draft policy be placed on public exhibition for 28 days.
Thank you for that. Look, this is a matter I've raised with the General Manager because I was concerned there was no reference in this policy to the internal ombudsman. And whilst I appreciate that they are different roles, I do believe there should be an acknowledgement for a resident who just goes and reads this policy that there are other policies to address these matters. And so I thank the General Manager and Ms. Lidgard for doing a number 2 for me, which addresses that issue. So I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 71 of the business paper. I'd make number 2, 3, and add a new number 2. The scope for the draft feedback and complaints policy be amended to include the following statement. Councillors' feedback and complaints policy forms part of the broader complaints management framework, which includes managing unreasonable conduct by complaints policy, code of conduct and procedures for the administration of code of conduct, public interest disclosures policy, Council's independent internal ombudsman service. And I'll declare that carried. So it just simply in this document draws attention to these other things, these other courses that people could follow. We now move on to 10.4, the the policy for unreasonable conduct.
Thank you, Mr. May. And before I hand over to the Group Manager, Community and Corporate Services, just by way of introduction, this report sets out a draft the draft managing unreasonable complainants. And Council has a responsibility to respond to customers in our community and provide good customer service. Council also has a responsibility to provide a safe workplace and also ensure Council's resources are used wisely and directed appropriately. I'd like to hand over now to the Group Manager, Corporate and Community Services, to introduce this item further. Thank you.
Thank you. This report presents the draft managing unreasonable conduct by complainants policy and seeks council endorsement to place it on public exhibition. The draft policy, like the policy we've just spoken about, is based on the New South Wales Ombudsman model policy that provides a guide for managing unreasonable conduct by complainants. The model policy aims to ensure transparency, accountability, fairness and consistency in the management of unreasonable conduct by complainants. Council has not previously adopted a policy like this before. This draft policy incorporates all sections of the New South Wales Ombudsman model policy and supports Council's broader complaint management framework. It's recommended that it's placed on public exhibition for a period of 28 days.
Thank you, and I've had first-hand experience with this, not only here, but in other lives, in other working lives experiences. But, you know, residents have got to be made aware of the fact that the energy that can be burnt by an organisation addressing issues that have been addressed, even on occasions by oversight bodies, you know, I think this is, you know, timely. So I would move in relation to item 10.4, the officer's recommendation on page 84 of the business paper 1 and 2, and declare that carried. Next item is 106, 10.5, Colo Vale.
Thank you, Mr. May. Coordinator Property Services, Ms. McCullough, will introduce this item.
Sorry, I was told that was being deferred, the Colo Vale.
Yeah, it's going to be, but it's still going to be introduced.
Okay. Sorry, this report is reporting back to council for following the community consultation for the monies that were from the sale of the old RFS. We undertook community consultation via Your Say Wingecarribee for 2 months. We also undertook consultation at Colo Vale Markets. That feedback has been is provided in the report and recommends that upgrade take place to Jerd Park and money be given to the men's shed as well.
I know that the residents of Colo Vale or the community group were very appreciative of the fact that you went to the market that day, because I was at the market, the following market with my wife, and my wife says to me, we can't go anywhere in this place without people talking to you. But they were really appreciative. But having read all the submissions, I was just a little bit concerned about whether this play equipment is going in the right place based on what residents were saying. And I don't think we should discount putting it near the old station just because we don't own the land. I don't share that view. So I'm not saying I'm going to change this, but I just think it's an opportunity for us to go back to the residents of Colo Vale and say, is this where you want it for sure? And in addition to that, the men's shed is an amazing organisation, and they're just not men's sheds. If ladies want to go, they can have their days too. Colo Vale has the hall, and it's very, very well used, but there's no real coffee shop, there's no pub, there's no club. I just seem to think I would like to give them another chance to see whether they think we're being fair in the allocation. They've raised a lot of money already.
Yep.
They're ready to go, but they're just kind of stuck. And I just don't think what we're suggesting is enough. So it just gives them another bite of the cherry. So it's no criticism of the staff in their recommendations. I would just like to think that we could have another look at it.
Yeah.
So accordingly, I would move that the matter be deferred to allow further consultation on the location of the play space and possible further allocation towards the men's shed, and would declare that carried. 10.06.
Thank you, Mr. May. Back to you, Ms. McCulloch.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, in 1991, Council entered into a 99-year peppercorn lease from Australian Property Syndicates for use of a small building adjacent to McDonald Sutton Forest as a tourist information centre. The Tourist Information Centre operated from the premises for a period of approximately 18 months from the end of 1991 to the start of 1993. However, the centre has not been utilised by Council since its closure in 93, and the space is currently being used by McDonald's for storage purposes. Investigations indicate that whilst it was thought that a tourist information centre at the site would be a good way to promote the Shire, inquiries received through the centre during operation did not warrant continued use. A search of Council's development and property files has been unable to reveal any information as to why the centre was leased to Council for a period of 99 years at peppercorn rent. Council's Tourism Coordinator has confirmed that the centre has not been used since 1993 and that there has been no intention over the past 20 years, nor any future plans to reactivate the space as a tourist information centre. The owner of the land has now requested that Council agree to terminate the lease so that the site may be redeveloped in the future without reference to a non-operative tenancy.
I think I'm going to answer the question you were asked. Good idea at the time, probably.
That's what I've been told.
And you can't criticise those kind of ideas, but obviously it hasn't worked. I went and had a look at this, and it's kind of a question without notice. On the other side of the road, there's the pie place, but up behind the pie place is a building in isolation up there too. Do you know what that is? Or
I don't actually, because I did go out to have a look at this as well, and I thought the same thing when I drove past, but I'm not sure what that is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was coming back down the highway and I turned off that way to go back towards Exeter. I've never been along that road before.
Yep.
And I saw that and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that is. It just looks like it's not on private property. So you wouldn't mind having a quick look.
I can certainly look into it.
I just thought of it then.
Yeah.
The other thing is that the council requiring the common seal and all this is very antiquated. You should have power of attorney for common seal, or a general manager, I should say, should have power of attorney. So if you have another look at that, to me, these are housekeeping matters rather than matters for the council. I think there could be a report giving notice, but all this formality I don't think is necessary when there's bigger and better things to do. In relation to item 10.6, I'd move the officer's recommendation 1, 2 and 3 on page 112 of the business paper and declare that carried. 10.7 investment report.
Mr. Mayor, the Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Kuzmanowski. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Interim Administrator. Just the statutory report for the investments, tracking under budget as we have, but catching up from a year to date. I don't think we'll get there with June coming up quite quickly. Interest rates are heading up, but I don't think we'll get there. In addition to the statutory report, we've also put the investment policy up for review. So we're looking to exhibit that for 28 days. No major changes, looking at still preserving capital from a policy perspective and aligning it to our cash flow requirements for the next couple of years as well. So in summary, looking to adopt the investments report and look at exhibiting the investment policy for 28 days with a view of coming back to adopt after public submissions.
Thanks for that. I think the vast majority of people would hope you don't reach your expectations because it's massive impost on property owners with their mortgages, isn't it? So
True.
you rob Peter, pay Paul. In relation to item 10.7, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 131 of the business paper and declare that carried. 10.8, the financial reserves policy.
Thank you, Mr. May. Back to Mr. Kuzmanowski. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick introduction. The proposed financial reserves policy was publicly exhibited for 28 days. Oops, excuse me. There was one submission received during the period. The report seeks to adopt the financial reserves policy, and in doing so requires the following: a release of $5 million from existing reserves as to establish a minimum working capital position. And the report also seeks to delete 22 existing internally restricted reserves and create one internally restricted reserve. These are outlined in the report. The proposed changes of this policy will be implemented as a part of Council's end of financial year wrap up.
So the budget out on exhibition will not reflect this until the first quarterly financial statement, from what you've just said.
From a budget position will remain where it is. There won't be a $5 million surplus there. That's correct.
Okay. Look, the important outcome of this is discipline, to make sure that this surplus is maintained for a rainy day. And, you know, I think I understand why, you know, the former executive dealt with this the way they dealt with it, but you've got to make sure that as managers, you make sure that the councillors have discipline. And the way it used to be done, I don't think was good. And Mr. Finch agreed with that. Is this the last recommendation of the Finch report? The investment policy, and this should be the last recommendations. I think so. They're should be fully completed.
The SRV might be the other one.
That wasn't his. That's me.
Okay.
The SRV stuff. Yeah. And I understand you can't do everything. Alrighty, in relation to item 10.8 on page 150, I'd move the officer's recommendation 1, 2, 3 and 4 and declare that carried, and thank everybody, including the ARIC, for their work in this.
Thank you.
10.19, the conservation for the Mittagong War Memorial Tower and Winfried West Park.
Thank you, Mr. May. The manager assets, Mr. Robinson, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement for the draft conservation management plans for Mittagong War Memorial Clock Tower and Winfried West Park to be placed on public exhibition. Both the War Memorial Clock Tower and Winfried West Park are deemed to be of local heritage significance, and so the conservation management plans detail the reasoning for this heritage significance, as well as defining policies to be implemented to ensure this heritage significance of the site is conserved, both in regards to ongoing management and maintenance of the site, as well as to safeguard with possible future development around the sites. It is therefore recommended that Council endorse the public exhibition of these documents, with a further report to be prepared and submitted to Council for final endorsement of the documents following this exhibition period and consideration of any comments received.
The reports are a repository of information, aren't they? They're good reads, all very, very interesting. In relation to item 10.9, I'd move the officer's recommendation outlined on page 166 of the business paper, 1, 2 and 3, and declare that carried. The next one, RENWICK Community Centre.
Thank you, Mr. May. Back to the manager assets, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, General Manager. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement for RENWICK Community Centre Plan of Management. In accordance with the Local Government Act, councils are required to develop plans of management for all community and Crown land under their responsibility. The purpose of a plan of management is to further categorise the land and develop guidelines or action plans to ensure the effective management of that land in accordance with the designed designated categorisation. The potential categorisations are parks, sports fields, general community use, cultural significance, or natural area. This plan of management will enshrine the categorisation of RENWICK Community Centre land as general community use, which is the categorisation generally adopted for community centres, halls, and libraries, as it is for areas where the primary purpose is for the physical, cultural, social, and intellectual welfare or development of members of the public. Council commenced the preparation of this plan of management in response to the completion of the RENWICK Community Centre and the handing over of the land and building to Council. The draft plan of management has been publicly exhibited for 7 weeks across March and May, as well as a public meeting held at the Community Centre in April. All feedback received is supportive of the general community use categorisation, and so it is recommended that Council adopt the RENWICK Community Centre plan of management.
This all started before you came. The former administration recommended to me that this be operational land. I couldn't believe it. But anyhow, it's corrected now. One question I have is, when will we be advertising for the coffee shop, or are we already?
Yes, thank you, Ms. May. We needed the plan to be adopted, and we'll be putting it out for expression of interest now that once the plan's adopted.
Can I suggest you put a sign up down there that we're now trying, because whilst most residents understood why I deferred this rather than have it operational, it did cause a problem with the coffee shop because it was illegal use. And so that's all now being corrected so we can move forward, because the residents down there just need as well as the community centre, they need a meeting place with coffee, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll make sure a sign is put on site.
Thank you very much. Okay, in relation to 10.10, I've moved the officer's recommendation on page 362 of the business paper, 1 and 2, and declare that carried. The Disability Inclusion Action Plan.
Thank you, Mr. May. Group Manager, Community and Corporate Services, Ms. Lagarde will introduce this.
Thank you. This report advises of the outcome of the public exhibition of the draft Disability Inclusion and Action Plan and recommends that the plan be adopted. The draft plan was placed on exhibition from the 22nd of April through to the 25th of May 2022. During this time, submissions were invited by Your Say Wingecarribee. Council also promoted the exhibition through Council's e-newsletter, a media release, and its community update. Focus group participants who contributed to the development of the draft document were also informed of the opportunity to provide further feedback, and disability service providers were encouraged to promote the draft plan to their clients. One submission was received, and this submission was in support of the draft document, however, raised concerns around independent living facilities within the Shire. It's recommended that this draft policy be adopted as placed on public exhibition.
Okay, in relation to this matter, item 10.11, I move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 431 of the business paper 1 and 2, and declare that carried. The waste strategy and curbside collection.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Acting Manager, Business Services, Mr. McAllister will introduce this item.
Thank you, General Manager. This report seeks council endorsement for the engagement of a consultant to assist with the development of a waste strategy and policy documents that are needed to guide the delivery of waste management services into the future. Council currently does not have an up-to-date overarching waste policy, and the draft waste management strategy has been in place since 2013. Key waste contracts for processing, disposal and curbside collection all expire in 2024. The project will include the preparation of tender documentation and the tender evaluation process for Council's next curbside collection contract. Community consultation will be a significant part of the project and will include community focus groups, consultation with staff and waste industry experts to identify opportunities in our waste management services. The timeframe for this project is constrained by the curbside collections contract expiring in June 2024, and the need to provide any contractor with sufficient establishment time prior to the commencement of the contract. This project will be funded from the domestic waste reserves.
Thank you. This is a very, very important report, and the commitment of the council on behalf of its residents in the form of dollars for the collection services is massive. We've got to make sure we get it right. Just so residents are aware, the General Manager and myself had discussions with the Mayor and General Manager of Wallandilly about opportunities to perhaps go together on this, but I'm afraid it's impractical. They're 4 months ahead of us, and they had these policies and strategies in place, which this council didn't have. So we're playing catch up yet again. When I first went on my villages meetings, the garbage collection was a big issue, and the need for residents to engage private providers. I don't know what they pay. They could pay less, they could pay more, but it was an issue because people pay their rates to us. And I know that in your listening tour with the senior staff, it's also been raised. So residents can be assured that in this consultation process, we'll be talking to villages and we'll be looking at innovative ways to hopefully address some of the issues. They might end up, we can't do it, but we'll look at all the options available to us, including our commercial collections, and whether we do it economically compared to the private sector. But they're all issues that will be addressed. The only concern I had in relation to this is I think they're different areas of expertise. The consultation versus the tender preparation, but the staff were on top of this, but they agree, but it wasn't clear in the recommendation to me. So I've amended the recommendation a little bit to, and if you want to bring it up, in number 1, adding the words noting that they are separable. In other words, we may end up with 2 consultants, or we may end up with 2 consultants joining together. There's a whole host of options, but we've got to move quickly with this. And the other thing is, I know that the $300,000 is well under the $500,000 threshold that the General Manager has to engage people and consultants, but I have no problem with the General Manager engaging people, but I do think it's important that the General Manager report back to Council on the successful consultants who are going to deliver these works, so that there's transparency in the process. These are big contracts, and whether they're for 5, 7 or 10 years, that'll be a matter for the professionals to deal with the consultants on, but they've got to be able to amortise, and it's my firm view that it should be new equipment that starts the contracts, because if it's not, you just have Donnybrook's further down the road, and you and I have both lived through that. So that's where we're moving, and you're a breath of fresh air to the organisation in this area, and I thank you for the work you're doing. In relation to item 10.12, I would move the officer's recommendation outlined on page 451 of the business paper, with the addition under 1, noting that they are separable, and the new item 3, General Manager report back to Council on the successful consultants to deliver the new curbside collection contract and waste strategy. I just whether we should put consultations at the end of that. Can we go back if you don't mind? No, that's okay. Declare that carried. Next item is the Agribusiness Equine and Produce Hub Roadmap.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Economic Development Coordinator, Ms. Campbell, will introduce this item.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, in November 2020, Council adopted the Southern Highlands Destination Strategy 2020-2030, which identified agribusiness and equine as significant industries within the Shire, with a focus on increasing overall economic value and job creation. Wingecarribee Shire Council, growers and producers, together with other government agencies and industry experts, focused on these industry sectors during 2020 and 21 in the wake of drought, devastating bushfires and significant industry disruption. 2 projects, the Agri-Equine reports and the Produce Hub feasibility study, ran concurrently, which facilitated collaboration on key common elements. It's noted that the projects were managed under additional complex and challenging conditions created by the global pandemic COVID-19. This business paper notes the attached reports and identifies actions where industry or others are lead agent, and also those actions that Council will include into relevant team operational plans and work plans. The projects reveal significant opportunities for ongoing collaboration and support in the development of the Shire's agri and equine industries and inclusion of new initiatives and opportunities as they arise.
Thanks very much. Look, I found these 2 reports extremely informative. I think some may be disappointed by the second report, but that's why you do these things. I found it very interesting in the foreword by Hugh Clark that he noted that unlike past strategic documents that were not implemented, that's now been addressed in the report of the staff, where you outline exactly what the council proposes to do with these reports, which is should be applauded, and I hope it is applauded by the people who have been involved in this. I had a bit of a problem understanding the governance arrangements for the agribusiness and equine report, but I can speak to people further about that later. But I think at the end of the day, the reports are first class and really lay out they really lay out a roadmap to take us forward, together with all the other players, the chambers of commerce and the key stakeholders group, but importantly, the facilitator of all this, the council, so that everybody knows where we're going, and the round table also helped with this. I also think it's fabulous that even though it's in effect in private ownership, we're working with the Moss Vale Showground people to do a plan of management, which will not only address these issues, but address the emergency issues that I think facilitated that to start with, the lack of planning by the part of the council for disaster. So look, all in all, I think this is very, very good. I would like to add number 5 though. I'd like the General Manager to discuss with Destination Sydney Surround South a formal release of the documents and appreciation ceremony. Obviously, a lot of work has gone into this, and I think if we could get someone like the Small Business Commissioner down to launch these, it would be a step forward, and it would be a show to, I think, the business sector that we now mean business in collaboration with them, but it'll be business where we're saying what we will do, not second guessing what we should do. So that's, I would like to move the officer's recommendation on page 162 of the business paper 1, 2, 3 and 4, and add number 5. The General Manager discussed with Destination Sydney Surround South a formal release of the documents and appreciation ceremony, and declare that carried. And if I could thank you, I can only second guess what has gone into this, but it's appreciated. Next item is the koala strategy, page 609.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Director of Communities and Places joining us remotely, Mr. King.
Thank you, General Manager. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Item 10.14 is to formally notify council of a successful grant application for funding under the New South Wales Koala Strategy Regional Partnership Agreement, and to accept funding for 3 grants totaling $850,000 over the next 4 years from the Department of Environment and Heritage. This money will greatly assist with koala protection and conservation, and the Minister's support in this area is greatly appreciated.
I don't know if this is a question for you or the GM. What's the chance of the officer who's responsible for this making a presentation to either council or the community? I think there's a lot of money, and I've heard that we've got 10% of the koalas in the state, in the Shire. Whether that's right or wrong, I wouldn't have a clue, but I just think people would be interested in hearing more about it. I would be.
I think through the General Manager, entirely possible, Interim Administrator. Given the considerable engagement of the community around habitat protection and reconstruction of koala habitat on both private and public land over the last 3 years, a public information session or a briefing for council once we have the staff resources on board for this project is an excellent idea. Absolutely easily done.
We may even be able to get National Parks and Wildlife, because the General Manager in your early days here and myself went out to the end of Canyon Lee to a new national park where they are planting an enormous number of gums to join the Blue Mountains and Moreton National Park, and as a corridor, and people just don't see what's going on. It's an eye opener for me. So you know, I just think it'd be value in a couple of months' time of having an opportunity for residents to come and see what is actually going on, and the great work that the council, in consultation with state, are doing in relation to habitat. So I won't put it in the recommendation, but we want you to get someone to jot it down. So in relation to item 10.14, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 609 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and declare that carried. And we now move on to the mine extension project.
Thank you, Mr. May. I'll ask the Director, Communities in Place, to introduce this item and provide a bit of context to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Item 10.15 is to provide summary information on the proposed Dendrobium coal mine extension for Council, and a draft submission on the proposal based on previous resolutions of Council, noting the limited timeframes for reporting this matter to Council and making a submission.
It's disappointing that you couldn't get an extension, but I think it's important that we still write. And I know this letter's gone, but a further letter go stating that the council has endorsed the decisions of previous councils in relation to this mine and our total opposition. So having said that, I'd move the officer's recommendation 1, 2 and 3 and add a 4. Right, for number 4. A further letter confirming council's position of opposing longwall mining and new coal mining in the Shire be forwarded to the Department of Planning and Environment, also expressing the council's disappointment that an extension, when requested, was not granted. in effect, it was an extension of 24 hours, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 613, the business paper 123, and header number 4, a further letter confirming council's position of opposing longwall mining and new coal mining in the Shire be forwarded to the Department of Planning and Environment, also expressing council's disappointment that an extension was not granted. And declare that carried. That finishes everything I've got. Nothing else. Thank you everyone for coming, and